Hello there, thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's story explores the hidden corners of the human psyche, gentle, yet profound. Stay tuned, and don't forget to support the channel so you won't miss the next stories. I found out my husband was in the closet, and it destroyed our marriage. My name is Lucy, I'm 33 years old, and this is my story. I had no idea, absolutely none. I never even suspected that anything was off. My husband Paul and I had been together for 8 years, married for 6. We had 2 kids, a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was normal. I thought we were just like any other married couple navigating the ups and downs of life, work, and parenthood. He worked long hours at a law firm, and I stayed home with the kids. Things weren't always easy. I'm not exactly great with money, and I do tend to spend impulsively. But Paul always seemed fine with it. He would just shake his head and laugh, like I was some kind of lovable screw-up. But there were some signs. I always noticed how much time Paul spent at the bar with his guy friends. I never thought much of it, though he worked hard, and after a long week, I figured he deserved some time to unwind with the guys. We'd made jokes about it in the past, like how I was the lucky one because I got to be at home with the kids while he was out having man time, but that's all it ever was to me, harmless guy stuff. At least, that's what I thought. It wasn't until a few months ago that things started to feel off. It wasn't obvious at first. It started with him being a little more distant. He'd come home late more than usual, and when I'd ask about it, he'd give me some vague excuse like, just wrapping things up at the bar or got caught up talking with a few guys. And I'd let it slide. I didn't want to seem like I was nagging, especially when he was such a hard worker. But it was the small things that started to add up. The lack of affection, the little short comments during arguments, his eyes not quite meeting mine when we talked. But the real kicker came one night when I borrowed his phone. I know I shouldn't have. But it was just sitting there on the kitchen counter, and my curiosity got the best of me. He had a message open from one of his friends, but it wasn't a normal conversation. It was something else entirely. Flirty, it was a text exchange between him and a guy named Daniel, someone I'd never heard him mention before. I clicked on the thread, and my stomach dropped when I saw the messages. It wasn't just casual talk, it was personal. They were joking about meeting up at the bar, but Daniel had sent him a message saying, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Miss you, love you, love you." I stared at that for what felt like forever, trying to make sense of it. Was it a joke? Was he just messing around? Maybe it was nothing, just some guy talk. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That night, when Paul came home later than usual, smelling like alcohol, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I had to ask, "What's going on with you and Daniel?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He froze, just standing there in the doorway for a second before he laughed it off. "What are you talking about? Nothing's going on." I didn't believe him, not for a second. I pushed further. "I saw your messages, the ones where you said love you back to him. What's up with that?" He seemed uncomfortable, but only for a moment. Then the defense mechanisms kicked in. "It's just a joke. Lucy, come on, stop being so dramatic." I didn't drop it. I couldn't. We argued for hours. I cried. He got defensive. And we both said things we didn't mean. At one point, I said, "I guess you'd rather be with your guy friends than with me, huh? You can't even give me a straight answer about who you're texting." He shot back, "It's not what you think, Lucy. You just don't trust me anymore." I didn't want to admit it, but I was scared. I was scared that maybe I had been blind this whole time. Maybe I didn't know my husband as well as I thought. But I wasn't going to be the one to back down first. I'd always been the kind of person who acted before thinking, and that night, it was no different. Paul spent the next few nights at the bar, and I spent the next few days obsessing over it. I'd check his phone whenever he wasn't around. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. And the more I looked, the worse it got. The messages kept coming, each one more affectionate than the last. They texted each other love you all the time, not just in the joking way friends do, but in the way someone says it to someone they care about, maybe even more than just a friend. I was angry, furious, but I also didn't want to confront him about it again. I wasn't ready for him to deny everything and tell me I was overreacting. I was too scared of what the truth might be. But something inside me snapped when I saw a picture of Daniel and Paul together at the bar, posted by Daniel on social media. They were sitting close to each other, their heads together in a way that didn't look like just friends. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew this wasn't just some harmless guy thing anymore. I had to know the truth, but deep down, I was scared of what it meant for us. The next few days after seeing that photo, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was hurt, devastated even. But I still didn't want to face the reality of what was happening. I mean, how could I? Paul was my husband, the father of my kids. We had a life together, this couldn't be real. Could it? But it was. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't see what was right in front of me. I needed someone to talk to, someone who would give it to me straight. So I called up my best friend, Chloe. She and I had been through everything together, from breakups to baby showers. She knew me better than anyone. If anyone could help me figure out what to do, it was her. She picked up after the second ring. Lucy, hey, what's going on? You sound off. I took a deep breath, sitting on the couch in the living room, the kids playing quietly in the background. It's Paul. I think he's seeing someone else, or at least he's got something going on with one of his guy friends. I don't know what to do. There was silence on the other end. I could almost hear her brain working, processing everything I was saying. Then she spoke, her voice low, but sharp. Are you sure? Like, really sure? I found messages, I said, my throat tightening, and I saw a picture of them together. It doesn't look like just friends. It's more than that, Chloe. She was quiet for a moment, probably trying to figure out what to say. Finally, she said, okay, well, you need to get yourself out of that situation. You need to divorce him, and you need to take half. He's obviously not respecting you or your marriage. Lucy, why would you stick around for this? Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Divorce, half, I hadn't even considered that. I didn't know what I'd expected her to say, but it definitely wasn't that. I wasn't sure what to feel. The thought of splitting up our family, of losing Paul, it made me feel physically sick. I love him, Chloe, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I still love him. I don't want to throw everything away, especially not with the kids. I don't know if I can do it. She was quiet for a long time, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft, but there was still an edge to it. I get it, Lucy, you love him. But you deserve more than this. You deserve respect. And he's not giving it to you. Don't let him walk all over you. Don't let him make a fool of you. You've got options. You don't have to keep putting up with this. I didn't know how to respond to that. She was right. In a way, I had options. I didn't have to stay in a marriage where my husband was clearly hiding something from me. But I couldn't just walk away, could I? Was it really that simple? I ended the call with Chloe feeling more lost than ever. I couldn't stop thinking about what she said, about how she was advising me to just cut him loose and move on. But I couldn't. I couldn't just give up on everything we'd built. I had to try talking to Paul one last time. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was a simple explanation. So the next night, after the kids went to bed, I sat him down. He'd been acting distant, more so than usual, and I needed answers. I wasn't going to be one of those wives who ignored the signs, who kept pretending everything was fine. I needed him to be honest with me. "Paul," I said, my voice shaky but firm, "we need to talk." He looked up at me from his phone, his face blank. "About what?" I saw the messages, I blurted out, and the photo. "What's going on with you and Danielle?" He didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at me. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the air between us thick with tension. Finally, he sighed, sitting up straighter. "Lucy, I told you already. It's nothing, just some harmless banter between friends. You're making a big deal out of nothing." I didn't want to hear that again. I was done with excuses. "Don't lie to me, Paul. I saw it. You're flirting with him." "Love you doesn't sound like just friends to me." His eyes hardened. "I told you, it's not like that. Why can't you just trust me for once?" I could feel my temper rising. "You're asking me to trust you after everything I've seen, after the messages, after the photo. You think I'm just supposed to act like everything's fine?" He crossed his arms, his jaw clenched. "Maybe you should start trusting me more, Lucy. I'm not the one with the problem here." That's when it hit me. He wasn't even trying to take responsibility for his actions. He was deflecting. He was making me feel like I was the one at fault for questioning him. "I'm not the problem, Paul," I said, my voice getting louder. "You are. You're the one acting like everything's a joke, like I'm just some idiot who doesn't notice what's really going on. But I'm not stupid." "I never said you were stupid," he snapped. "But maybe you should focus more on our marriage and less on what I'm doing with my friends." I wanted to scream. This wasn't how I pictured this conversation going. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was supposed to be getting answers, not making things worse. "I just want the truth, Paul," I said, my voice breaking. "I want to know if this is even worth saving." He didn't say anything after that. He just stood up, grabbed his jacket, and left the house, and that was it. I sat there in the silence, staring at the empty space where he'd been, wondering if this was the end. The next few days were a blur. Paul didn't come home that night, or the next. I tried to call him, but he ignored my calls. At first, I thought he was just cooling off. But as the hours stretched into days, I started to feel that nagging sense of dread clawing at me. Was this really happening? Was he really just going to shut me out like this? I spent those days with the kids, trying to keep things normal, trying not to let them see how shattered I was. They were still young enough not to notice the tension between Paul and me, but I felt like a stranger in my own house. The house that used to feel like home, where we were a family, had started to feel cold and empty. Then came the text. It was from an unknown number. "Hey, Lucy, I don't know how to say this, but Paul and we've been seeing each other. And he told me he loves me. I know it's not easy, but I think you deserve to know the truth." The message was signed simply, "Danielle." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My vision blurred, and I had to sit down. It was one thing to suspect something was off, but this was undeniable. There it was, in black and white. Everything I had feared, and more. I didn't know what to do. My brain was a mess. My thoughts scattered, as I reread the message over and over trying to make sense of it. I couldn't even process it right away. It was like I was living someone else's life. How could I have been so blind? How could I have not seen this coming? It didn't take long for Chloe to call. She must have heard something through the grapevine, or maybe Paul had mentioned something. I could feel the tension in her voice the second she asked, "Did you get the text too?" I didn't even respond at first. I didn't know what to say. "Lucy," she pressed, "are you okay?" "I'm not okay," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. It's real. It's happening. Paul's been with Daniel. He told him he loves him. I heard Chloe curse under her breath. I knew it. I knew something was up. You've got to get out of there, Lucy. There's no point in holding on to someone who's obviously checked out. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. I can't, Chloe. I love him. I can't just throw everything away. The kids, my life. All that's fine, she snapped. But what about you? What about your happiness? You deserve so much more than this. He's made his choice. He's made it clear that you don't matter. I mean, what more do you need? He's gone, Lucy. Don't waste your time. I was silent, feeling the weight of her words. I wanted to scream at her that she didn't understand, that she wasn't in my shoes, that it wasn't that simple. But the truth was, part of me knew she was right. Part of me knew that I should leave, that I should fight for my own peace and sanity. But another part of me just wanted to curl up and pretend none of this was happening. I wanted things to go back to the way they were. I wanted Paul to come home, apologize, and tell me everything was going to be okay. But I knew that wasn't realistic. The man I had loved, the father of my kids, was gone. He was already somewhere else, with someone else. That night, Paul came home late after the kids were asleep. I could hear him walking around downstairs, and I waited for him to come to me, but he didn't. Instead, he stood in the doorway of the living room, staring at me. The silence between us was suffocating. I took a deep breath and said, "We need to talk." He nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting this. But there was something different in his eyes, something cold. He wasn't the man I had married. He wasn't even the man I thought I knew. "I got the text," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know what's been going on. I know about you and Daniel." He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, arms crossed, watching me with that same blank expression. I had expected him to deny it, to say something, anything, that would make me believe it wasn't true, but he didn't. "I'm sorry," he finally said, but there was no sincerity in his voice. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this, but I can't keep pretending, Lucy. It's not fair to either of us." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I stared at him, my mind racing. "You're just going to walk away?" "Just like that," he shrugged. "I don't want to keep hurting you. I don't want to lie to you anymore." I felt my anger flare up again. "You've been lying to me for months, Paul. You've been lying to me every time you walked out that door. You've been lying to me every time you kissed me goodnight and promised everything was fine." He sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I didn't want it to get like this, but it did, and I can't change that. We've both changed, Lucy. You're not the same woman I married. And I'm not the same man you thought I was." The words cut deep, deeper than I was willing to admit. The truth was, he wasn't wrong. We had changed. I had changed. And maybe, just maybe, this was the wake-up call. I needed to see that. But that didn't make it hurt any less. "Is this it?" I whispered, feeling tears welling up. "Is this how it ends?" He looked at me for a long moment, and for a brief second, I thought I saw regret in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by the same cold indifference. "I'm sorry, Lucy, but I think we're done." I couldn't believe it. When we both signed the papers, Paul didn't even argue when I told him I wanted a divorce. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. A part of me, the part I didn't want to acknowledge, felt relieved. But the pain, that deep ache in my chest, was still there. The kids were confused, but they were young enough to bounce back. I tried to keep everything together, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and in time, I accepted that this was the end of the road for us. After the divorce, I thought I'd feel empty or lost. But instead, I began to feel this weight lift off my shoulders. I was free from the constant anxiety, the fear of never being enough, the exhaustion of trying to hold on to a marriage that had been slipping through my fingers for so long. I didn't know it then, but Paul's departure was the beginning of something else. Something I would eventually see was for the best. But what shocked me the most was what happened after. Paul started showing up in the neighborhood, and he looked completely different. At first, I didn't recognize him. He was wearing makeup, light foundation, some eyeliner, he had on a dress. And not just any dress, but something flashy, vibrant, almost theatrical. His hair was styled in a way I'd never seen before. It was like he had shed the person I thought I knew and become someone else entirely. It was almost as if he was finally free to be himself, the person he had kept hidden for so long. His appearance wasn't the only change, his whole demeanor had shifted. He was more confident, more vibrant, more unapologetic. It was jarring to see him like this, but I couldn't deny it. He was finally happy. In a way, he was the person I'd never known he could be. And it felt like a weight had been lifted from both of us. I remember seeing him walking down the street one afternoon, his arms around a guy, laughing. They were holding hands, no care in the world. It stung, seeing him so comfortable in his own skin. But in that moment, I realized something. The man I had been holding on to, the man I had tried to save, wasn't even the man I wanted anymore. I didn't recognize him, and maybe that was the point. We weren't the right people for each other. And now he was finding his real self, the one I had never understood. And I was better off without him. He had become someone who didn't fit into my life anymore. Someone who couldn't love me the way I deserved. And maybe, just maybe, he was better off without me, too. Watching him come into his own, unafraid and unapologetic, made me realize that this divorce might have been the best thing that could have happened to both of us. It saved me from a future where I was stuck in a marriage to a man who wasn't even being true to himself. And it allowed him to become the person he had always been, but couldn't show me. There were no regrets on my end, not anymore. Not when I saw him finally happy and free, even if it took our divorce for him to find it. It felt like everything happened for a reason, even if I couldn't see it right away. Sometimes, the hardest decisions lead to the best outcomes. Thank you for listening until the end. Every story holds a piece of someone's truth, and maybe a piece of your own. If this touched you in any way, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. See you in the next video.